This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers and true crime junkies. This is Nanette Bartow back with another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving and everybody is stuffed and fat and happy and enjoying the leftovers. We are just going to carry back on with some information in regards to my involvement in the case, what I found. We were actually climbing out of that portion of this entire presentation where I get to complain about all the things that have occurred to me during that time. We've got a couple more slides that we're going to actually cover in regards to that. And then we're going to be moving directly into the Zodiac case or cases, should I say. So we're going to go back to the presentation at this point, and we are waiting for a guest to come in, which I'll introduce when he shows up. But for now, I'm just going to continue on with the story. Basically, I started diving into Robert Graysmith's book on the Zodiac. As you know, I believe that he had some affiliation with the newspaper companies at the time, but then, of course, had moved on to making these purported wonderful books of investigative theory in regards to the Zodiac case, whereby he typically names Arthur Lee Allen as his number one suspect, despite any evidence that would prove that Arthur Lee Allen was not the suspect. So I took a look just in the first 2 pages of his book, and I found some reviews. And I found them extremely interesting because obviously the media is backing him, and they're backing him wholeheartedly. They promoted him book after book and review after review, and of course made him world renowned or worldwide known in regards to his work and effort placed into these books. And he does state that the majority of his information that is placed in there is information that he obtained through investigative work, such as discussing with police departments and talking to witnesses and family members that were family of the victims. And of course, maybe even possibly, I do believe he talked to also some of the victims who survived. So getting back to those particular reviews that were making him so well known and giving him all the props that he had, I noticed that the very first one at the top, and he labels this as praise for Zodiac Unmasked. It says, Zodiac Unmasked clearly illustrates that the elusive quality of the Zodiac had little to do with his cunning and everything to do with law enforcement and aptitude. Now, this blows my mind because we have been media driven and media told that law enforcement did not do their job, that law enforcement actively blundered it, they blew it, they didn't catch him because they didn't know what they were doing. And I think that I had actually on many occasions when I first started this case, I have said these same things, and obviously I was ignorant to the actual evidence that was out there, and I didn't realize how much the media played into our perception at that point in time. But the fact that the New York Press, of all places, one of the biggest newspapers in the industry, has literally given praise to Robert Graysmith in his Zodiac book, saying that law enforcement was inept. And of course, this is to perpetuate that thought or feeling that they didn't do their job versus they couldn't do their job. Their hands were tied. Some are being told not to do anything about it. Some are told not to touch it. Some are round filing the evidence because they don't want anybody else to be the one that gets the glory for it. But the bottom line is I think it is because they are just puppets, again, of the same system that is leading us to believe that there's no solve to this case. So I also went down and I saw where Inspector Dave Toschi indicated fascinating, like reading a brand new mystery. It's not brand new. It's the old stuff. It's the same thing that they already didn't know or did know. For whatever reason, this inspector felt the need to come out and promote Robert Graysmith in this endeavor. The book list said it was an excellent study. Now readers can learn all that Graysmith has learned in investigating the case further. No, they can't. He's going to still lead you in his direction, as Tim Miller did with his suspect in the I-45 killings, and it's not going to get you anywhere. You're going to be turning circles, and you're not ever going to get the truth out of anything that's online, including Tom Voigt's board. Publishers Weekly said Graysmith's evidence against Allen plays solidly. Are you kidding me? So again, provocative, bizarre, Graysmith's taut narrative brings the horror back with jolt upon jolt. That's the San Francisco Chronicle, folks. The same newspaper company that Deborah Perez stood on, got all the news press in the world for a false suspect, and then ultimately was determined not to be what she said she was, and she's gone now. Bye-bye. A chilling real-life detective story, Savannah News Press says. Real-life detective story? Are you really trying to detect anything other than tell your point of view? The autofocus, the murder of Bob Crane, which I have skipped across his murder, and it is in my presentation, though I don't necessarily attribute it to Jack. It doesn't mean that he didn't do it, and they may know something more than I know, and that's why he's included this into the mix of the Zodiac books. But it says one of the more intriguing unsolved murders in showbiz history. I bet. Will keep the reader turning the pages. And then, of course, that's by the Detroit Free Press. Cleveland Plain Dealer said luridly compelling. Kirkus Review said gruesomely sexy. So he's got all of this media that, it looks like all of these reviews are coming from all these different media outlets that are really promoting such a great job that he did. And I actually thought to myself, is it a coincidence that the media is promoting Graysmith so heavily? There's a possible connection between Zodiac and Graysmith as well. There may have been some communication sent to him, so he may have some inside knowledge, or at a minimum had been introduced to through communications the Zodiac himself, which would have been Jack. So let's take a look at these media outlets. Oh, hi Nolan. Good morning.
Hi Nanette. Good morning.
I'm just now getting started with the reviews out of Graysmith's book. Have you caught up with some of that?
Yeah, I've been on the whole time.
Awesome. All right. So I wanted to see who these media companies were, what states they came from, and this is the research that I found this last week. The Savannah News Press review was also in the 1986 version of the Zodiac book by Graysmith. So these reviews were copy and pasted into the Zodiac Unmasked, thus the I guess really he's just compounding what he believes is credibility by adding them to the next book, because this is what they said about the previous book. Not much has changed about the second book, except for I believe he made some alterations to the letters, and then those alterations prevents to some degree a complete identification of Jack, or they believe it completes a non-identification of Jack Tarrance, or the letter A, that belltop A that we've talked so much about. But thus, the person related to my first search worked for most of these companies during the production of Graysmith's book, The Zodiac. So let's look at this. I did a search for Publishers Weekly, which was one of the ones we just talked about up here in where's my cursor? Right up here in the right-hand corner. And I find somebody named Genevieve Studiford, who worked for the Publishers Weekly. She also worked for 23 years with the San Francisco Chronicle and the Kirkus Reviews. So let's go down this list real quick. Publishers Weekly, San Francisco Chronicle, and Kirkus Reviews. So three of these views or reviews are coming out of somebody who actively worked, probably discussed a lot or talked a lot with Robert Graysmith himself. And we can see right here in the Wikipedia on this gal, here's Kirkus Reviews, here's San Francisco Chronicle, and here's Publishers Weekly. So I went ahead and I took a look at the rest of the list to see how that comes out. San Francisco Chronicle, who also ran Deborah Perez's story. The Savannah Press is Georgia's. Atlanta, Georgia is one of these states that I state that Jack Tarrance also killed in. But Georgia's biggest newspaper has backed him. The Detroit Free Press out of Michigan, which that's the Oakland County child murders, backs him. The Cleveland Plain Dealer out of Ohio, and we do know that there's some Ohio affiliation with some of this, and that there is a potential letter that had been written to the Ohio area. And the Kirkus Review, owned by a New York-based media company by 1970. So before Graysmith even did his book, he has several reviews coming out of New York. We've got him coming out of Ohio, and New York is the New York is another set or series of killings in which writings were involved, and we'll be talking about those as well. So literally every single media outlet at this point in time that has backed the reviews on Robert's Graysmith to publish widely the misinformation of Arthur Lee Allen as the number one suspect, or all the people who are concerned and willing to press this issue so that the truth cannot be found out, lead us and dissuade us or persuade us to believe that law enforcement somehow was inept. I showed that Publishers Weekly company profile is also out of New York. Kirkus Reviews, the New York Review, and it looks like Thomas Vail became the paper's editor and publisher in 1963. On 67, the trustees sold the Plain Dealer, which is Cleveland Plain Dealer, to a newspaper chain for $54.2 million, the highest price ever paid for a U.S. newspaper, and again, a New York-based company. So, and we do know that there were actual New York letters written in the anthrax case. So every single state that promotes him is involved in some type of disinformation campaign, if you will, based on the fact that this is actual areas where Jack had killed. The New York Press, New York, and then the San Francisco PD out of California. The book list is out of Chicago, Illinois. So again, Chicago is another one of those areas, lipstick killing. All states that a Zodiac communication and or crime spree has taken place. The book list, obviously, we can see over here to the list, and they did a review for him. And again, right there, based in Chicago, Illinois. Now, original Zodiac letters were actually said to have been found in the garage of Toshi's home that law enforcement has now said breaks the chain of custody and can't be used as evidence. What the heck? If you found an original Zodiac letter, would that not also be like finding the Mona Lisa or the original Declaration of Independence? I mean, come on, people. You're not going to toss it aside and say it's not evidence. You're going to actually probably try to sell it for really big money. Either way, they did find it in his home, in his garage. So that means that this man has taken evidence out of the chain of custody from the San Francisco PD, and he is now promoting Robert Graysmith's version of events. Now, keep in mind that the Zodiac Killer made reference to comic strips that had not been produced to the public yet, and those comics were Dick Tracy comics that were from a newspaper in Chicago. So there's that tie back to the Chicago and book list. Also, the Zodiac made a huge number of references to writings from books. So I wonder how close he was to these entities in reality. And the fact that one of the individuals have been found to work for 3 of the entities that literally gave these reviews for his book. Does that not blow your mind, Nolan?
Yeah, it's more than coincidence, I think.
Yeah, simply more than coincidence. And that actually takes
the original Zodiac, but I read Zodiac Unmasked. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the facts, they're irrefutable. So he's pretty good on the crime scenes and the facts and the different writings. But it's this conclusion that Arthur Lee Allen was Zodiac that I totally disagree with.
Completely. Absolutely. 100%. I think that he obviously had an in with Toshi. So the SFPD, that I do believe the facts you can probably count on. And that's the only reason I'm going to read his book. Albeit I don't want to, I'm going to, because I know he has the facts straight, and I can't count on what you're reading on the internet these days because they want you to not figure it out. So they're twisting things, removing things, bifurcating things, and just really trying to make sure that nobody can actually put all these puzzle pieces together. But that's a little too late because these puzzle pieces have been put together, and that's why I'm doing this presentation. So I think that brings me to a great point, in which is coincidences, Nolan. Now let's see how these coincidences fare for you. I believe I've shown adequate attempt at notifying all the right authorities and agencies with no policing of the evidence or investigations, except for the attempts of the FBI which they portrayed to. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they were really investigating it for Dennis, or I think they could have strong-armed these other local authorities into giving them the evidence if they truly wanted to test that DNA or fingerprints or anything else. So, they did portray that they were responsible for some of the investigations, which now makes them inept for not demanding control over those particular things, over the evidence and the case, and a shame on the others that aren't listening. Is it a coincidence that no formal agency will properly investigate Jack? What do you think?
I think that they may know more than they're letting on to, but I don't think they want the truth to come out.
Correct. And investigating
I
Jack.
I think it's a little kind of sinister, really.
Right. And I think if they actively investigated Jack, they'd find that there's no reason that they could exclude him, just as I have not been able to do.
Right.
So 1976 to 77, is it a coincidence that the letter to Dr. Danto and the secret witness letter in the Oakland County child murders linguistically matched the Zodiac's work? A handwriting identification of the handwritten letter has been made, and that the Dr. Danto letter claims the guilty accomplice is named Allen, spelled just like Arthur Lee Allen. Is that a coincidence?
Who knows? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, especially because this is written after, right? I mean, after he's already a suspect.
Yep.
In 1981, is it a coincidence that the Walshes suffered the same fate as Tim Miller, Senator Percy, Senator Voinovich, Barry King, James Dagnan, a senior Office of Price Administration officer, and others, all with the underground aspects of the mob? The suspect in Walsh's case, they have named Otis Toole. He's actually related to Henry Lee Lucas. Have you seen anything on the Henry Lee Lucas documentaries?
No,
oh my gosh. Yeah, so this man, Henry Lee Lucas, and Toole jumped on board with Lucas. They were actually cohorts, and I guess at some point in time. So I think they tried to say they operated together in some cases, but I don't think they were ever able to actually put that together. But the basis of the Henry Lee Lucas documentary shows the attempt at the Texas Rangers to feed information to Lucas so that he can claim over 200 murders and clear those 200 murders off the books of different states all around the United States. And then he was found out to be bogus by a particular attorney. That attorney called him out and said, you couldn't even have been here at the time. Why do you know this information about this case? How is it possible you have this inside information? You couldn't have been there. You didn't commit this murder. So this attorney who comes against the Texas Rangers then sick themselves and the IRS on this particular attorney, start contacting all his associates in his surrounding, and tried to get them all to say that he was some type of a bad person who was taking kickbacks and bribes, and they tried to demise him through the IRS and use that means to make sure the man couldn't continue his business, kind of like Bart did to me. The bottom line is...
So where did he practice, in Texas?
No, I think he was from another state, and the murders that Lucas was taking credit for, Lucas could never have been there. So to top that off, this attorney was actually able to break this wide open. They were able to determine that many, if not almost all of the murders, I think except for one or two, that Lucas did not commit. And here's where the irony really comes in. In the end of this entire thing and the Texas Rangers' nefarious actions with Lucas, Bush pardons Lucas for the murders that he admits to, that the Texas Rangers have fed him the information so that he can cop to it, so they can close these hundreds of cases.
Wow. So all these murders, they close the cases, but they're basically unsolved still?
Well, yeah, because
they won't be solved now because they closed the cases. That's crazy.
They pardoned him on some of the cases, and it has been found that he could not have committed the cases. So yes, now technically they are open, but in the eyes of the public, everybody thinks Henry Lee Lucas did it, because guess what they showed the most of? Henry Lee Lucas admitting to it. Did they come back and show a whole heck of a lot? Not till this documentary did I actually see that there were people that were adamantly against the fact of closing their cases because while he had inside information in these cases, he didn't have it correct and he couldn't have been there.
So
Not a
that
coincidence.
begs the question, why did the Texas Rangers want to put the blame at his feet and just to close the cases or maybe they had other motives as well?
Yeah, they wanted to close the cases and obviously shut everything down on this particular conspiracy. And Texas is where Jack's from. Texas is where murders have been committed. Texas has got a huge motivation and desire to make sure that these cases are closed and never connected to anything else, just like the FBI had the desire to find that the anthrax case was not connected to these cases, that it was someone else, so that all of these puzzle pieces can't be put together. The bottom line is Walsh is now actually stating that the person who killed his son was Toole, and Toole is in cohorts with Lucas. Can we trust anything that these people say? When you watch this documentary on these people, these are some of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life. There is no way they perpetrated these crimes or the communications. And I've actually seen Toole's writing, and Toole has fourth grade writing at best. I mean, it is absolutely the most rudimentary writing, like he is just beginning cursive in his life. So these are not intelligent people, certainly not intelligent enough to have gotten away with all of these murders. In 1990 to 91, is it a coincidence that the Zodiac Killer wrote to John Walsh, America's Most Wanted, on the FBI's Most Wanted list, and the FBI FOIA file archives on the Zodiac case stops at 1991? I don't think so. And he suffers the same effect as Tim Miller, as many of these others. His son was taken from the Sears department store arcade. I thought I had read somewhere or seen something that there was some type of a communication for Sears Roebuck from the Zodiac. It may have been a paper he wrote on or something like that. I'm not sure, but I do find it very interesting that he was stolen from a department store arcade. And then, of course, we know he is now blaming Toole for this. Is it a coincidence that Kurt Baggett was on the John Benet Ramsey case while his son Bart Baggett was on the Zodiac Killer case, and that Bart knew who Dennis was and was aware of Jack Tarrance, and that I happened to be Bart's student? Again, I don't think that that's a coincidence by any means.
Wow.
Early 2000s, is it a coincidence that Bart worked with John Walsh, Tom Voight, who bashes Dennis, the FBI, and they worked with the FBI obviously through the John Walsh series, and Deborah Perez? So why did Bart try to deter me? That's a huge coincidence. Is it a bigger coincidence that Tom Voight was given the privilege of info on the Z cases after his father worked for the Los Angeles Herald, the very paper that the Black Dahlia's killer wrote to? Again, no. Is it an even bigger coincidence that the Zodiac wrote Tom Voight in 2002 and 2003, giving fingerprints and DNA to prove it is him, but Tom denies that they are from the Zodiac Killer?
Why would he do that?
Because it's Jack. They knew who Jack was, but
yeah. So he's part of the disinformation campaign. Then he doesn't want the truth. It's like camouflage.
Exactly.
Crazy.
And we're going to get to some of the emails from that Sad Badge guy that did the cheese letter. I thought I wasn't going to bring it up again, but I did. Anyways, our great Eagle for the day.
And Voight is the most well-known presence on the internet in regards to Zodiac, correct?
And all law enforcement and all media defer to him for information. Wow. Yes. In 2005, when they round filed all of Jack's evidence at SFPD, they did the color scans that got put onto Voight's board, which meant that the original letters existed up till at least 2005 and then went missing. That Tom Voight has now, he takes all calls. So he gets to tell people what they want to hear. In fact, one of the articles I just read, he is still pushing his suspect, Gaikowski, instead of the right suspect. And then, of course, I mean, we know now that he has family members in the SFPD, and he has a father who is an investigative journal for the Los Angeles Herald. So he is neck deep with these individuals. And some of the information suggests that he's not really in charge of his own board. Someone else is. He's just there to be the go-to guy. He's just like your PR person.
He's the figurehead. Okay.
Yes. So is it a ginormous coincidence that after September 5 finale letter claiming responsible for the Zodiac and Anthrax letters, which was a 4-year anniversary, mind you guys, it was written in September of 2005, and anniversaries are extremely important to this case as well as location, but to the is a 4-year anniversary to the 9/11 anthrax mailings of September 2001 that goes missing, and all the original Zodiac letters with SFPD went missing just after Voight changes his website server, getting rid of all the older unaltered versions of stories and letters, puts up high resolution color and altered scans on the new site, while SFPD just continues taking any calls or comments on the Zodiac case while deferring all to Tom Voight during the reign of Heather Fong. Will we hear more about this from Sad Badge? Yes, we will. Is it a coincidence that a Zodiac Killer like greeting card is mailed to Bruce Ivins a year before he's questioned or under investigation for a crime that the letter writer in the 2005 Tim Miller finale letter takes credit for, as well as the Zodiac Killer crimes and anthrax, while calling out Bush cryptically? Or believes that politicians are running around with their heads cut off like chicken, as he wrote in another one of his crime-spree letters? No, this is not a coincidence. There's definitely political ties, and he believes, or this suspect believes, that there are politicians who are concerned about what he knows and what he will say. Is it a coincidence that President Bush trumped a veto by Congress to go to war by not just one, but both reasons a president can override Congress, which one is an act of international terrorism and the second is an act of biowarfare? So in 9/11, we had two events that took place: the running in of the Twin Towers, which they blamed on the East, and then we have the anthrax letter. Yep. So a week later, well, and it's my belief that we had the 9/11 events, and then and Congress still told Bush, no, you cannot go to war. So following that, almost a week later, we see the anthrax letters that are mailed to politicians, that are mailed to different locations on the East Coast. And then all of a sudden, boom, Bush gets to go to war from this second act. And if you read your political science books, folks, you'll find these are the only two reasons that the president can override a veto from Congress. And these two reasons occurred exactly in the same month of September, allowed Bush to go to war and probably get his hands on the oil he so rightly wanted to go to war for. But in the end, after the Twin Towers, it is my understanding that Congress still said no to war, and Bush, but then the anthrax letter happened, and now Bush is going to war. The FBI has received much criticism for their handling of the 9/11 events, folks. So again, I think that pulls back into question, as Nolan has indicated, that the FBI has some nefarious inclinations or deeds inside these cases.
Yeah, and one thing about 9/11 too, why did the third tower go down? It wasn't even hit by a plane.
I'll tell you why. The
Okay.
Treasury shared the same floor as the CIA. Bush is under investigation for losing $270 trillion of our Social Security funds. The only way to decimate and not find a track, trail, or paper, just like they did on the MK Ultra because somebody accidentally filed it in the wrong filing cabinet, is to demolish the building. Demolish. Nobody will ever be able to touch a computer, touch a server, touch a piece of paper that came out of that building. Period.
Well, that's so funny you use the word demolish, because all three buildings look like demolitions, the way they went down.
That's exactly it. Exactly. They
Straight
imploded.
down.
They imploded from the inside,
Yep.
like you would drop a building in the middle of a New York City high-rise.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, biggest coincidence of all, I was one of Bart's students. Dennis found me, and I told the truth. I found the emails where Bart was assisting me on a press release, and this is actually what Bart wanted me to say when I went on the news. I have found similar idiosyncrasies between some of the documents I have compared and examined from Jack Tarrance and the purported known writings of the Zodiac. However, I am nowhere near an identification at this point. There is much more research required to complete and render any opinion as to the validity of Jack Tarrance being the author of all or any of the Zodiac writings. Now, that was not what I believed, was it, Nolan?
No, so he wanted you to back off, basically, from naming Jack.
Right. He thought he could control me and get me to say this on the news as if I hadn't made an identification, when I clearly was sitting on more legitimate characteristics in any handwriting examination I have ever made in an anonymous writing. So it being one of the biggest cases with the most communications, obviously, that I've ever seen hand in hand for hand, but more connections and more characteristics that were similar to the suspect that I was looking at than any other case I've had. However, I went ahead and I made the identification on CBS 13 News anyways, because Dennis knew what my opinion was, and Dennis wanted me to express my opinion. And then the second that I did that, Bart was interviewed for that segment too, and CBS 13 News went on to go ahead and play the resolve of that, which was when he was interviewed, he said, I was wrong. Now, they only got 2 seconds from Bart on that clip, but all the world needed to hear was that I was wrong by my own mentor, and they did that on purpose.
Wow.
I think that it's not so much of a coincidence. I think if people are starting to see these circles and how they ride, they will start to understand what I've seen and what I've gone through. I have so much information here that for me to actually compile and put it all together would blow everybody away. I don't have the time or the energy to actually go back through everything that I researched and studied 14 years ago. But I am trying to give you bits and pieces and snippets of what I can compile and put together while showing you the proof that backs what it is that I'm saying. I like I said before, I now know why Bart said I was in over my head. It screams of a huge cover-ups on all ends, and it is literally my opinion that it's because of the anthrax-related communications. I have seen them try to close the anthrax case on dead people without proper evidence. Why would they do this? This suggests that their hands are not tied, or their hands are tied, and those who do not want this broken wide open are still very much alive, controlling and stifling any solve in this case, because they will be brought down.
I think, yeah, they don't want the public to know about all of Jack's associations.
No. I think he was a crisis antagonist that worked on a political realm every time there was some type of political strife going on, i.e. the Zodiac happened at the time of Vietnam War. So what a better way to scare all the rioting people back into their homes? There's a serial killer on the street, happens to be in the town where the riots are happening, right? Atlanta, Georgia child murders. At that point in time, we have the Watergate trials going on. So again, look over here, folks, focus over here, not on what's going on in the politics. The anthrax letters are occurring at the time Bush is wanting to go to war. You can track all of literally these particular cases occurring around the political strife. So, that actually puts me into some new research I found, because one of the things that I had been looking for quite some time in Jack's writing, because he did it rarely, but when he did do it, it was very apparent. A year before I decided to become an apprentice of document examination with Bart's school, his father did some behavioral analysis on my handwriting, and he told me the industry needed more people like me, and I didn't understand what he meant, so I asked, and he said morals, ethics, honesty, integrity. I was actually shocked that he's telling me about a legal system and a forensic science that lacked these types of items. But now, after seeing what's going on and his own personal involvement and his son's personal involvement, I can honestly say that I now know why he meant that. He was talking literally maybe about himself and the people who surrounded him. Either way,
it can be like hired guns, basically. They could come, the conclusion can come before the analysis.
I think that Kurt Baggett, if I'm correct, made the assertion or was quoted. Now, Kurt said he didn't use a percentage. He told me this personally, but a newspaper quoted him as saying that the handwriting of Patsy Ramsey matched the ransom note by 99%. I don't find that to be true, and there are many examiners who did not find that her handwriting matched. So again, was this a purposeful? And you got to keep in mind, Nolan, Bart and Kurt both do things like 20 on 20. CNN News, like they've been on all these huge media outlets and all these Hollywood type things like Texas Walker Justice and Harry Phillips 20 on 20 on Larry King, on like they work within this industry. So they are definitely the go-to people when somebody wants to dissuade the public from knowing what the truth is. My laundry and research, though, actually found that as I was looking through Dennis's book, I found this new communication I hadn't seen before. And what caught my eye was this rewrite. So on the inside of here, we can actually see this belltop A that was actually started by Jack. And he must not have made it clear enough, or he did not like it. So he redrew this particular A right over the top of it. Well, guess what, folks? That's the A found in the Zodiac letters. That's the home run hit. Anybody can do a belltop A, but that's not how we learn. That's a choice. That's a persona writing. You're doing that because you want to be seen. You're also undercover. There's a lot of indications about that belltop A, but the bottom line is that everybody back then learned the stereotypical handwritten letter A was done in this fashion. And not only does Jack have the capability of doing it, but he does it, and he does it in the same exact fashion as the Zodiac. A after A after A. Yes. And I just actually updated because of Dennis's book. I found more information. Dennis wasn't good at going through what he had. While he wanted to show you what he had, he didn't actually know what he was sitting on and what was going on. But I found this obituary listed in Dennis's book, and it is from January of 1968, where Jack's stepdad, Scott Willimuth, dies at age 51. Now, it shows he was a merchant marine during wartime, and that's Navy affiliated. He was an iron worker, just like Jack was, and he was a member of the Moose Lodge in San Jose, California. And that caught my eye because, of course, I did not know. Well, I know that him and Flova, Jack's mom, were actually married in California. I did not know they resided for any period in California until now. So by this accounting, Jack found Doris in 1966, married her, and returned to Texas, because this particular obituary indicates that Jack is a pallbearer at this particular funeral, and that he and his brother Don are from Austin, Texas. Now, if they're indicating they're from Austin, Texas, then that must be currently. And this coincides with Sandy Betts' research that showed that Jack in July was still living in Texas. Doesn't mean that he wasn't consistently back and forth between California during this time, because we have heavy indications and information and evidence that supports that Jack was back and forth constantly between this time frame to California and back out. And I'm going to show you how that works out, because now I've revised the timeline of Jack's existence in California and Texas.
51 is quite young to die. Do you know what the cause of death was?
I do not have a clue. And it may have had something to do with the things that he worked with as a merchant marine. And during wartime, it could have been cancer. It could have been, any chemicals that he may have come into contact with, from that time frame. I don't have that answer. Dennis is no longer alive, and I'm not really sure that Charles would know. I mean, I could reach out to him, but he's kind of sparse on his returning, any information to me. So I show Jack did return to Texas after finding Doris and marrying her in 1966. Even though Doris may not have recalled that and thought that she lived in California from 66 on, that could be a year off or so, which I'm finding. So even if this was true, the article says that Flova moved to Austin, Texas in May of 1967. And that means from San Jose, California, because Willimuth was a member of the San Jose Moose Lodge. So now I've tracked them back to San Jose, at least as early as April of 1967. And you're going to be shocked when I show you how this plays into Sherry Jo Bates, which would coincide with Jack helping and traveling through Riverside on April 30th to mail the Sherry Jo Bates Had to Die letters. So if you can imagine, these letters are mailed on April 30th of 1967. And the first day that the Willimuths step foot back into Texas and become a resident is May. So here's Jack moving his parents back to Texas. Right. And that this article states that they were residents as of May 1967. So Jack would have had to have traveled back up to San Jose and back out of San Jose. And of course, you're not going to show up a week early to Texas, because your house probably isn't going to be ready for you. This is also an indication that it is likely that Jack is not only assisting in the move because his stepfather is too sick to assist. Obviously, he only dies within months of them moving. And that he would also probably found the location where they would live. Jack would have been responsible for a lot of this, as he showed this type of assistance to his mother throughout all of his life. Either way, I don't find it that it's a coincidence that these were mailed in Riverside, California on April 30th, 1967, and that Jack's parents were actually actively moving at that very point in time from California to Texas. So Jack, January of 68, yep, got that, so they lived in Austin, Texas. Jack was a pallbearer with Gerald D. Barnett and Thomas F. Johnson. And I believe I've shown already that Jack had also adopted at one point in time J.W. Barnett, which was another family member's name as an alias when he was using cell phones and other things like that. He would obtain the accounts in these aliases' names. Now, it says Jack and Dawn were living in Austin, Texas at this time and had family in Iowa. Charles Tarrance, who lived in San Jose. So his mom and dad could have been living with the brother, though I'm not sure that the address is Charles's just yet. I still need to further that research. I'm looking into this Ryan Street address, which we'll talk about. And then California and Charles Wilkemuth lived in Los Angeles, California. So there were many points of origin where Jack had family along the way where he would viably stop and visit and rest when he was going and moving his way from family member to family member, which would allow him to also have perpetrated additional crimes in the Los Angeles area. Jack is actually back and forth from Texas, as I said, to California during 1968. Where did that go? Where is my... I thought I had a breakdown of that. Maybe I'm still getting to it. Anyways, I came across, as I was looking up some of these places, the suicide of Nicholas Adamshock. Evidently, he was about to put out a tell-all book about Hollyweird's sexual appetites of many of the celebrities and many of them being gay. Which, of course, we know that is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you look back to the 1968 era, it was definitely looked down on. It would have created a huge amount of controversy for many of these celebrities because the world wasn't ready for that yet. He was also friends with James Dean, who was killed early, but of course we know that was in an automobile accident, and Elvis Presley with many overdoses. Now, one of the things that kind of shocked me about James Dean is that he was asked to make this drive with this new car. So he wasn't supposed to be on the road with this particular car based on the research. Do you know anything about the James Dean thing?
I do not.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time and I didn't want to dive down another rabbit hole, but kind of like the Senator Voinovich, where his daughter was killed by a man in a van driving through a crossing guard street crossing where the child was leaving from school and struck and killed that child. While that person was found to be guilty of that death, so they had their suspect. It doesn't mean that that wasn't intentionally done or perpetrated against Voinovich by any means. So when I looked at the James Dean case, and it indicated he was supposed to travel by other means, but was talked into by somebody close to him to actually take this new powerful vehicle on the road for this drive from wherever he was going to wherever he was supposed to end up to shoot a film, and ends up dead in the middle of it because he cross strikes a car, was very interesting. So the mystery death of Nick Adams just goes back to what we refer to in these cases as suiciding. There's, again, he's overdosed, as we've seen Marilyn Monroe supposedly did, Elvis Presley supposedly did, as we saw this last individual supposedly, Bruce Ivins supposedly did. So here we have another purported suicide that occurred right before he's getting ready to put out a tell-all book on Hollyweird. Here it is. So the research makes it sound like Adamshock was going to out many celebrities in his tell-all book that might have gotten him suicide. So this is an excerpt I took from Wikipedia. Anybody can look this individual up and come to their own conclusions on that. This I thought was kind of hilarious. So somebody was mocking both Obama and Lincoln, and it says you can fool some of the people all of the time, and you can fool all of the people some of the time. Now here's where I make a liar out of Lincoln. Now I found this while doing research on these Zodiac cases. I was doing an image search for maybe it was Adamshock or whatever it was, trying to get more information on that case, and came across, or maybe it was a letter. I was looking for one of the communications that I thought I could find. The cheese letter. I think I was looking for the cheese letter. So
Gouda
yeah,
for
that
you.
was Gouda for me. So Stephen Dewhurst writes that approximately 1967, Jack's battery business also closed. And at first I thought this was erroneous and the year was wrong, but now the evidence is starting to show me that Jack was in fact in Austin, Texas, at least up till mid, if not fall of 1968. Because in 1967, his U.S. battery company closes down and he moves to Llano, Texas, which is more than 2 hours away. And the article that Sandy Betts found actually showed that they moved there 5 months ago from Austin, Texas. So 5 months ago from the date of this article, which was July 25th of 1968, meant that all the way up until February of 1968, Jack was living in Austin, Texas, and then moved to Llano, Texas. But by the end of 68, we have definite references to him being in California. And again, he would have also been back and forth to California to research the new location where he was going to move the family to. This is something he always did 3 to 4 weeks in advance. He'd go to the new state. He would research and find where they were going to live. I think ultimately kill somebody while he's there. I've shown this pattern, or you will see this pattern as we go through the presentation. And then he comes back to the state that he's currently living in. So he is now a phantom or a ghost in that town while the investigation ensues for a suspect that's not even there. And when he turns around and moves the family there, he looks like a good old-fashioned family man just coming to the area, and he could never possibly be the suspect in those crimes. We see a few more crimes that are committed in that area, and then he goes to research the next place. We see the new killing in the new state, and then we see him come back, move the family to that new location again, and the crimes pick up there, and they end over here. So you guys follow along as we go through these murders, because you're going to see every time I say Jack leaves, the murders stop, unless there is some type of evidence where I can show you who he's actually back in that state during the time of that murder, which also begins to be another big coincidence.
Do you know when Dennis Tarrance was discharged from the military?
I do not, but I do have him listed in here, and it's very eerie what he's going through. And I actually have a new find in regards to the Lake Berryessa murder and the second suspect that was witnessed. I think it's going to kind of blow everybody's mind when I get to it. I'm not sure if it's coming up too soon or if we'll make it to it, but I know he did 2 tours. So one of the things that Dennis referenced in his book was that Denny must have liked killing, because you're only required to be drafted for 1 tour. Once you do your tour, you're done. He chose and elected to go back for a second tour.
And that article shows that he has no qualms about killing. And I had my suspicions about his involvement with Jack or with Zodiac, because I think there was more than one person involved. The primary suspect is, of course, Jack, the dad, but Dennis's stepbrother, I think, is a suspected accomplice.
Well, and this is where I'm going to blow your socks off. And when we get to that, it's going to be absolutely amazing. I do find that his stepbrother is a good likeness of the composite match. But you know how genetics work, and sometimes your nephews will look like you. Sometimes your aunts and uncles look like you, right? Well, it turns out I found 1968 pictures of Jack's brother, Don, the one he was living in Austin, Texas with, who then moved out here Don is the one who lived in Riverside when Jack came to Riverside and killed Sherry Jo Bates. So it seems that Don follows Jack around wherever he is. He is substantially younger than Jack as well. So when I look at the composite, or I look at Denny's Vietnam pictures, he's way too young and way too thin to be the second suspect that's described, but he has a good facial likeness of the composite that was drawn. When I found the 1969 pictures of Don looks identical to Dennis.
The composite?
In turn to the composite, because he has a very good likeness and shares a lot of the facial characteristics that Denny carried, that Don was likely the person that was with Jack. He would have been older.
Jack, of course, looks like his brother too a little bit. So
no, he doesn't. No,
he doesn't.
His son looks like.
Son does. Okay.
Looks like Jack's brother, and we're definitely going to cover that.
But Jack has a lot of different masks. I mean, in appearances,
Yes, I actually, based on you saying that, I've been going through his pictures and I'm going to compile an entire PowerPoint or a couple slides of the PowerPoint presentation based on all of Jack's different looks. You will be absolutely 100% surprised that this man does not look the same from one picture to the next. He is a master of disguise.
Right. And his weight fluctuates as well.
Correct. He is like an actor ready to prime up for the next movie and become whatever it is that they want him to be. Lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, gain weight, change hair color, change facial hair, change. I mean, like the man was constantly changing, basically.
Yes.
This brings us to our first murder, in which I believe could very well be related to the Zodiac cases. March 17th of 1968, 48-year-old Stuart Mayer is killed on Pine and Taylor Street in San Francisco, and the car is found on Pine Street, which he was walking from his apartment to his car, and it says he's the chief tax consultant for the Western Pacific Railroad. So now we have the railroad inclusion that we talk a lot about the Zodiac and Jack's beginnings. We have the mob influence that we know surrounded the railroad, and we have the chief tax consultant for these individuals who may or may not have been under indictment to divulge the tax operations of the Western Pacific Railroad. I really don't know why this man was killed, but he was hit mob style. It says a man in a dark trench coat from the opposite side of the street ran across, came up behind Mayer, and shot him behind the ear with a .38 caliber pistol. Well, this is exactly what was done to Paul Stine, even though it was done inside the car.
Yeah.
It was what was done to RFK.
Yeah, that's that location behind the ear at point blank range.
Yep. So this looks to be a specific hit. And is it irony that this person works for the railroad, since Jack's claims to have used the railroad for many years, which includes to kill, but also very mobbish and unionish related. So I have included this as a possible hit that Jack has completed. Also, I cross-referenced the Stine shot behind the ear on Maple Street, because Pine Street, where this one occurs, so now we have the tie-in. There's always a tie-in from one to the next, whether it's, taking evidence from one scene and leaving it at another, or the cross-referencing of what's going on. But I don't think that it's a coincidence that this man's killed on Pine Street. And then when Jack is picked up by the taxi cab, he's asked actually to be taken to a location. And before they get to that location, or maybe after they get to that location, he then directs the cab driver to continue on to Maple Street. So he wasn't going to stop on, I don't know if he was going to stop on one of those tree named streets, but the fact that this was Pine Street and Maple Street, I thought was a huge coincidence. And that the Zodiac's first stop was, like I said, changed to Maple on purpose. So the San Francisco Examiner ran on Monday, March 18th, 1968. Bizarre killing of tax expert on Nob Hill. A man who waddled like a duck was being sought in a bizarre Nob Hill execution-style murder. Well, you have to remember that they described the Zodiac in the Stine case as having a lumber. He has a problem, evidently, with either a leg or a back, or he waddles, basically. He's lumbering. He's not really walking, in a straight and orderly fashion, because we know that Jack has a lower back issue that he eventually has surgery for.
So and the inspector's named Jack and the witness is named Jack. That's pretty. Yeah. That's a weird coincidence, too.
Right? It says he never glimpsed his assailant, who approached him from behind, placed a small caliber pistol behind his left ear, and fired. Mayer, whose home was only a few blocks away, crumbled to the sidewalk at Pine and Taylor Streets. He died at Mission Emergency Hospital less than an hour after the shooting. Inspector Jack Cleary said the strange slaying was witnessed by Jack F. Winters. So we got two Jacks on top of our Jack. Jack. 30, a magazine writer from Columbus, Ohio. So we got another media inclusive witness who is staying at a hotel in the vicinity. Winters told the inspector that Mayer, who was walking along Pine, had halted for a stoplight at Taylor. The attacker, who had been on the opposite corner, quickly crossed the street, walked up behind Mayer, and fired. Then he ran, his gait causing Winters to compare him with a duck. He was dressed in dark clothes and appeared to be between 30 and 40 years old. Perfect. Because in 71, Jack is 41 years of age. So Jack is right within that time frame. Jack was 40. So police searched Mayer's neat 3-room apartment, but found no reason why anyone would want to kill him. Okay.
So you're saying there was an investigation into the railroad's Finances?
I don't know,
That's
but the only reason why the mob takes you out is because you possibly could give information that could hurt
You
them.
know too much, yeah.
Yeah, you know too much. So the quarters were described as extremely neat and well furnished, and the occupant as a quiet, immaculate man. Mayer had a brother in the east, but his parents are dead. Cleary said Mayer's car was found parked in the 900 block of Pine Street. Its contents and interior were being analyzed for possible clues, including fingerprints, but nothing beyond that was mentioned in regards to it. But I think this might be our first time, and I know that again, once I said Jack is going to be back here looking for the new place to live, and at any point in time he could have come back to California, as he often did, because he had family here and he was always around visiting. On April 4th of 1968, we have Martin Luther King Jr., Memphis, Tennessee, assassinated like JFK and RFK.
They had a patsy in that case. James Earl Ray was a patsy. No.
All right. Well, it's time. I've completely ran over at this point. I just got my notification because I didn't have timers set for today's podcast because it's a pre-record. But we are now actively, I think, discussing possible activity that the Zodiac Killer was involved with. Once again, Nolan, thank you for being here. If you'd like to come back next week, which will be the week after Thanksgiving, we can go ahead and resume this on the Martin Luther King, because I think this is right up your alley.
Yes, I'll be finishing my book on the King assassination probably tomorrow.
Awesome. All right. We'll talk to you soon. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.